Mennonites arrived in Manitoba in 1874, and a new documentary tries to capture what that journey was like.
When we tell stories, when we hear stories, they root us to a certain place. They root us to a certain group of people. They root us to where we've come from. But the stories that our ancestors tell root us to a specific past, specific events. They root us to a people, and they root us to ourselves.
That's a clip from the documentary Where the Cottonwoods Grow. The film commemorates the history of Mennonites in this province 150 years. It's been since that journey began, and it's been seeing wide success in its screenings across southern Manitoba. Dale Hildebrand is an award-winning filmmaker who grew up in Halmstad, Manitoba. He's the producer, co-writer, and director of Where the Cottonwoods Grow. Good afternoon, Dale.
Good afternoon. How are you doing?
I'm doing well, and you?
Very good.
Good.
It sounds like your weather's a little colder. I'm in Mexico currently, so it's a little warmer here.
Oh, yeah, it's a tiny bit colder here. Yeah, minus 23. But as we say up here, it's a dry cold.
Yeah.
So technically, you're a Mennonite filmmaker, but this is your first project about Mennonites. What drew you to tell this story?
Well, I was doing a feature film in Sicily, focusing on it was a theatrical picture, comedy, and my wife's Italian, so we started venturing into that road when I was telling this story. And she always said, "I got to do something on the Mennonites." And my sister came forward with something. The Plett Foundation came forward with something. The Mennonite Archives came with the whole idea of, our 150th anniversary is taking place this year. So we decided to sort of see what could come of this. And, we didn't know if we were doing some short films or a long form documentary. And it just sort of evolved and it took on a life of its own. And we've had so many champions from Manitoba that have come on board and, put their heart and soul into this picture. And it's been an amazing experience.
So what happens in the film? What story does it tell? What goes on?
We start the film in 50 years later, in 1924. The migration takes place in 1874. And in 1924, a woman is walking through the snowy, barren land of frozen Manitoba, and she ends up in a house barn, a historical house barn. And a gathering of women have come together for a day of quilting. So as they are quilting, she is telling stories from journals, diaries, books, historical archive material. And so throughout the film, they are making a quilt, and each patch of the quilt is symbolic of another chapter of the film. And so by the end of the film, we've made a quilt and we've told our story.
Oh, yeah, that's a really clever device and, very visual, of course, and the actual quilting and the grouping of the Mennonite women also in the house barn, which is also a historical artifact of the Mennonites in Manitoba. So how did you research this?
Well, we researched all over. We had, the help of the, Conrad Stace and Aileen at the Plett Foundation, and also my sister came on board for the research. So we researched all over Manitoba at the archives, but we also researched in Ontario, across Canada, across the United States, and into Europe and Russia. We even have, the Library of Congress, many different places in the States. And we even we built 3 different worlds in our film, because a lot of the archival material is non-existent because Mennonites didn't have photos from that era, or certainly not any film. So what we did is, from a place in England, a place where they did shipbuilding, we found the original blueprints of the first ship that took the first boatload of Mennonites across in 1874.
Wow.
And in computer graphics, we recreated that ship based on those blueprints. And our journey across the Atlantic is based on that actual ship. And they're surrounded by icebergs at one point, like the Titanic type of scenario.
Yeah.
We also built the grasslands of the Ukraine, the Midwest of the United States, and also in Manitoba. And we built I shot aerial footage of the Red River, and then we built a steamship in computer-generated imagery, and we had it floating and the billowing smoke going down the Red River, and it looks phenomenal.
Wow, it sounds like
we
it.
We researched everywhere. We left no stone unturned.
Yeah. And you obviously, as I was saying, you've been having a lot of success with this film, especially in southern Manitoba. So why do you think people are connecting with this so much? Is it because of the creative ways you're telling this story, or is it because they haven't heard the story put together in this way? Why is it making such a splash?
Sure, I want to say it's all me and my creative. I think it's a story that was needed. It needed to be told. We have a lot of wonderful historical books, and we have some really wonderful Mennonite films that are coming out and have come out in the past. This is told in a different way, and we try to make it very theatrical, very visual. We try to embrace the emotional impact of this story. You got to think this journey. They traveled 20,000 kilometers, and they came from a village, or many different villages in Imperial Russia, which is like, in essence, current-day Ukraine. And many of them had never even seen a steamship or a train before in their lives, and suddenly they're traveling 20,000 kilometers. And they are, you got to think they're kind of sealed off. So perhaps they're more vulnerable when they get to different ports and many different diseases. And, it is an era where there was a, higher death rate, but there was a lot of loss during this journey. There was a lot of children that were lost as well. And I think a lot of those stories resonate. And we try to take stories from journals and diaries and stuff like that really told the real story of their journey. I mean, we can debate the historical relevance of the accuracy of some of the journals, but this is the real people that wrote these stories. And I try to embrace them. I try to tell those stories. And I think there's a sense of heart and there's a sense of soul in these stories that we're telling. And also, a lot of these journals and a lot of these diaries were written by young men and and elderly men. So there were few journals written by women. We did find a few, and we did incorporate them. But that's why we also wanted to have the whole house barn, women quilting, and the retelling of the stories as if they are the carriers. They are carrying forward the stories of the past.
Mm-hmm. Well, and you seem to have a fairly emotional response yourself to this film. I know you've put so much into it, but how have you been feeling with the response that you've been getting from the people watching the film?
Yeah, this response has been phenomenal, overwhelming, and I'm really happy with that. But most importantly, I'm happy because it's finding a platform and people are watching it, and the story is being told. And I tried to tell a story that isn't just directed to the Mennonites, it's directed to a global audience. Anyone can understand the Mennonite story when they watch this film. But we also deal with many different aspects of that. You got to think, this is the 1870s. Every cowboy movie you've ever seen took place over, historically, a 10-year span of history. That's when just before the trains came in and all the cowboys existed because they were herding cows to specific terminals and stuff like that. Mm-hmm. So that's the same era that we're dealing with. And we're also dealing with, the Americans built railroads. Railroad companies built railroads, but the way they were being paid is by being able to sell land. So by selling land, they need to bring in immigrants, and this is part of the story of bringing in immigrants. So we have the whole idea of colonization, and I've never really explored the idea of colonization. I've really never fully understood colonization until I went into this documentary, and I think we give it a fresh perspective because we include the great-great-great-grandnephew of Louis Riel, the great-great-great I think son-in-law or something of Chief Yellowquill. Mm-hmm. And he's the original signatory of Treaty 1. So they tell another aspect of colonization that isn't the old sort of idea that the Mennonites came to barren land. Well, they came to land that had the indigenous culture, the Métis culture, and there's a whole idea of this colonization and nation building, and where do the Mennonites fit into this? And I think the story, to me, is fascinating, and I think it has resonated for people that we didn't gloss over it. We hit the Achilles heel of this, but we also tried to show respect to all parties.
Well, it sounds like it has very broad appeal and is garnering all kinds of accolades. So thank you very much for being on Radio Noon and telling us about it.
Thank you kindly. I really appreciate it. And hopefully people come to this screening this Sunday.
This Sunday. Okay. Thanks a lot.
All right. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Dale Hildebrand is the producer, co-writer, and director of Where the Cottonwoods Grow. The next screening of the film is this Sunday, January 19th in Gretna. The screening is at 2:30 p.m. It'll be at Buehler Hall on Clawson Avenue, and tickets are $20 and can be purchased at the door.